Joseph Peruta, also known as the Old Man, was a respected soldier in the Gambino crime family and considered a key member of Sammy Gravano's Bensonhurst, Brooklyn crew. He is the only known mobster who asked for a mercy killing after becoming terminally ill with lung cancer. The proposition was not agreed upon by John Gotti, but Paruta died before the mercy killing was performed. He was born in Bensonhurst on December 3, 1929, to first-generation emigrants from Gerasi Sicula, Italy, of a Palermo family from Sicily. Paruta was originally an associate who served in the crew of Gambino crime family captain Salvatore Aurello. He served in the Gambino crime family under the tutelage of Carlo Gambino and later Paul Castellano. Sammy later said, "Everybody called Joe the Old Man. He was only about 15 years older than me, but he already had white hair and looked kind of decrepit. He was tough and loyal. Old Man Paruta would kill for me as quick as he would get me a cup of coffee. Over the years, there was nothing I couldn't ask of him." His captain, Sammy the Bull, would later say that he was like my own personal Luca Brasi, in reference to the contract killer character from The Godfather. Following puberty, he started noticeably suffering from premature aging, which made him appear several decades older. He was a short man in stature with thin arms and legs with a thick torso. By middle age, he started to lose his telltale white hair as the Werner's syndrome worsened. He had a hoarse voice, and his skin started to thicken and suffer from cataracts. He suffered from smoker's cough that was brought on by his years of smoking cigarettes. He was married to an Italian-American woman named Dorothea, who he nicknamed Dottie, and had several children. He was a family man who would regularly take his family out to dinner at Tali's restaurant every week and have a large dinner. Frankie DeCicco later told Sammy an amusing anecdote about a robbery that Paruta, himself, and several other criminal associates had arranged to pull off. He stated, "It seems in his early days, Frank DeCicco was going on a robbery with some guys, and for this particular score, they needed a lockpicker. Someone told Frank that Paruta was just the person they were looking for. Frank was surprised. He said to Paruta, 'Why haven't I heard this before about you?' Old Man Paruta just smiled in response and said there wasn't a better lock guy around than him. So they're in the place and Frankie nods at Paruta, who steps forward, and what he does is he kicks in the door. 'See, what did I tell you?' Paruta said. Frank was stunned. He couldn't stop laughing. And if that ain't enough, Paruta holds out for his end of the loot. His reasoning is that they never would have got inside the place without his talents. So you know a guy like that is all right. He had a mild-mannered nature and never demonstrated anger towards his fellow associates. After the murder of Frank Fiala by Sammy the Bull, Edward Garofalo, Thomas Carbonaro, Michael DeBatt, and Nicholas Morando, they assembled at his saloon, Sammy said about Paruta. It is suspected that Joseph suffered from Werner syndrome, a rare autosomal recessive disorder that is characterized by the appearance of premature aging. By 1959, at the age of 30, Joseph had the telltale condition of the syndrome by having a bird-like facial appearance. This made him stand out among the mob associates in Sammy's crew and made him the target of teasing due to his elderly appearance. Other signs that Paruta displayed was cancer and heart disease. It is unknown if Paruta was ever diagnosed with having the condition. After the Robert de Bernardo hit, his smoker's cough got worse. Sammy made arrangements through some doctors he knew and checked him into the Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center in Manhattan, New York, for testing. The prognosis was that he had terminal lung cancer that had spread through the rest of his body. The doctors gave him only a year left to live. The chief doctor later confided to Sammy that he had lied to Paruta's family and that he only had 3 months to live. The Bull felt that he had to honor his friend. Even after being diagnosed with terminal cancer, he did not stop smoking even when staying at the cancer center. His dying wish was that he become initiated into the Gambino crime family and die a made man. Sammy sent word to John Gotti through his brother Gene for permission to fulfill his last wishes and make his dream of becoming a made man true. Sammy personally conducted the ceremony in his room at the cancer center. When it came time for him to prick his finger for the blood to mix with the holy card, Sammy could hardly get a drop. He was now reduced to a living skeleton. By 1982, Peruta was starting to act depressed over the murder of his friend Joseph D'Angelo, who had been shot to death over a barroom dispute with an associate of the Colombo crime family. Sammy became concerned of his friend's mental well-being. He lost interest in gambling and stopped visiting the horse races at the Aqueduct racetrack in the afternoon like he always had done. He told the bull, when asked about his depression, "Stymie ain't here no more. I'll be with you at your side until the day I die." On December 2nd, 1985, Neil Delacroce died. Sammy stated, "Even before this, we decided we had to split up and go underground. If there was a leak, somebody had to survive and keep playing. Frankie DeChico said him and me would move into Joe Watt's basement. Joe and his wife and kids would stay upstairs. John Gotti and Angelo Ruggiero could do what they wanted. I told Debbie I had to leave for a while, maybe for weeks, maybe for months, years. Don't ask. I don't know how long. Nobody in my crew knows anything, except old man Paruta. We stayed in contact with John and Angie using certain phone numbers. After the Roy DeMeo trial started, Thomas Bellotti was known to pick up Paul Castellano and drive him to a restaurant where they sat in a table near the back and discussed business before heading to court in Manhattan. Both Paul and Thomas did not know who Peruta was. Sammy and Watts planned to have Peruta walk into the restaurant and go right past them into the men's washroom. In there, someone would plant a ski mask. He would put the ski mask on and come out with 2 guns. They would be sitting there eating and discussing their trial when Peruta would just run out shooting. The rest of them would be outside, inside, surrounding the vicinity of the restaurant, supporting him with backup. Later, Frank reported that Paul Castellano had sent him a message to be at a meeting at Sparks Restaurant in Manhattan. It was here that the actual execution would later be orchestrated and carried out. Peruta would not be chosen as one of the shooters in this planning of the murder of Castellano and Bellotti. After a violent encounter with an outlaw biker in his Bensonhurst, Brooklyn bar, Joseph Peruta offered to help murder a biker who attacked Sammy and almost murdered him. After remaining a fugitive from the mob, the biker returned to Bensonhurst after a few years. Sammy the Bull said, "He reaches out for Peruta's kids and asks that they sit down with their father. He knows their father is connected, but he doesn't know he's with me. He says he had this trouble with Sammy the Bull, and he knows he's a marked man. He wants Peruta to talk for him, and Peruta says, 'Sure, you're good friends with my kids. I'll talk to this Sammy for you. Just take it easy. Go about your business. Stay low-key, and I'll reach out for Sammy.' Peruta's son obviously knew their father was bullshitting him. The kids know Peruta is with me and everything that means. The murder contract was later called off, and the outlaw biker's life was spared. On June 5, 1986, Robert D. Bernardo was lured to the basement offices of Sammy's Drywall Company on Stillwell Avenue in Bensonhurst, Brooklyn. Acting as if it was just a regular business meeting, Sammy told Peruta to get DiBernardo a cup of coffee. Peruta got up, but instead of getting the coffee, Peruta took a .380 caliber semi-automatic pistol with a silencer from a cabinet behind DiBernardo and shot him in the back of the head. Nicholas Morando became hooked on crack cocaine. Sammy later said about Nicholas, "He became like a renegade. He went berserk. He didn't want to be in the crew no more. He was going to start his own little gang. I couldn't take a chance on him running around. He knew too much, so I got permission from John to kill him. We finally got Nicky to come by Tolly's, and he went with Huck, Thomas Carbonaro, to pick up the old man, who was still alive then. Joe got in the back seat and shot Nicky twice in the back of the head. Me and Edward Garofalo were trailing in a car behind. We dumped the body in a vacant lot. It was found the next day. In 1984, during one of Sammy's bedside visits to Paruta, he asked him to kill him. He told Sammy, "Kill me, Sammy. Kill me, please." He tried to get the bull to understand that a swift bullet was the best gift a true friend could give him. He couldn't stand the pain anymore. But like every murder of a made man, which Paruta was, even a mercy killing, he had to get permission. He sent a message through Gene Gotti to John Gotti. He tried to prepare Gene and explain the situation as best as he could. Although Gravano never found out what Gene told John when they discussed Paruta, Gotti denied the mercy killing. He said that there was no way he would authorize a murder contract on a made man under the circumstances they were facing. Sammy brought Gotti's discussion to Paruta, who did not accept the answer. He begged Sammy and prevailed on him that the friendship between them was above everything, and that the only way he could prove his friendship was by carrying out the murder. Sammy ordered his brother-in-law, Edward Garofalo, to get a gun with a silencer. Sammy gave Paruta 1 day's notice to have his family away from the house on the day he was to be murdered. Thomas Carbonaro would be stationed outside the house in a car, ready for a swift getaway. Edward and Sammy would go through a back door that would be left open by Paruta. The two of them would go up to the bedroom where Joseph was confined to having fallen very ill at this point. Edward would sit him in a comfortable position and then join Carbonaro in the car outside when Sammy would shoot him. The bull later said, "It was all set. I was home waiting to be picked up by Huck and Eddie. My wife was there. The night before I had been real irritable. When Debbie mentioned this, I put her off. I said I had things on my mind. Now I stepped outside for a second, and when I came back, she said she had sad news. Eddie had just called. He said that old man Paruta suddenly took a turn for the worst. He was rushed to the hospital by ambulance, but died on the way. He was only 59. My man of loyalty, of heart and soul, a man of honor, were gone." His friend and family consigliere, Frank DeCicco, would later be murdered a year later. The deaths of D'Angelo have any of his original close friends or crew left having all met their demise either by his hand or at hands of others. The deaths of his criminal associates would later play a factor in deciding to testify against the Gambino crime family and his former boss and friend John Gotti. After Paruta died, he would help support his wife and children financially over the years. He was the only member of Sammy's crew not to meet their fate by being murdered. He was the last member of Sammy's original Bensonhurst, Brooklyn crew that he had inherited from Salvatore Orello after Frank DeCicco was murdered by a car bomb in 1985, 2 years earlier. Born in the Lower East Side section of Manhattan, Stephen Gramada was a drug trafficker by the early 1930s. In the late 1940s, he became a full member or made man with the Mangano crime family, later known as the Gambino family, under its founder and boss Vincenzo Don Vincent Mangano. With the disappearance of Vincent Mangano and the murder of his brother Phil Mangano, also in 1951, then Captain Albert Anastasia became boss. A former head of Murder Inc., Anastasia was one of the most dangerous and murderous mobsters in New York. He promoted another captain after the murder of previous underboss Frank Scalise, Carlo Gambino, to be his underboss. During this period, he worked in a crew with brothers Joseph, Joe Piney Armone, and Stephen Armone. In 1957, the other New York City crime families started questioning Anastasia's leadership. He had reportedly been murdering innocent people just because he felt like it, as he once ordered the murder of a tailor he saw on television, just because the tailor had been robbed and reputedly was filing his report. Other mob bosses such as Don Vito Genovese and Tommy Lucchese and Meyer Lansky eventually had enough of Anastasia. In 1957, Gambino ordered Joseph Joe the Blonde Biondo and Stephen Armone to murder Anastasia. Stephen reportedly included his brother Joseph on the hit, but Joseph had been arrested on drug charges. Stephen then replaced Joseph with Gramada. On the morning of October 25, 1957, Anastasia entered the barber shop of the Park Sheraton Hotel, now the Park Central Hotel, in Manhattan. As Anastasia relaxed in the barber chair, Stephen Gramada, Arnold Wittenberg, and Stephen Armone rushed in, shoved the barber out of the way, and started shooting. The wounded Anastasia allegedly lunged at his killers, but only hit their reflections in the wall mirror. Anastasia died at the scene. After Anastasia was killed, Profasi crime family mobsters Carmine Jr. Persico and Joseph Crazy Joe Gallo claimed credit for the murder. Gramada and his two associates were never seen as the real killers. No one was ever arrested or tried for the murder of Albert Anastasia. In 1965, Stephen Gramada and Joseph Armone were convicted of smuggling heroin into the United States from the Netherlands and received 8-year prison sentences. In 1970, both men were released from prison, and Armone was promoted to captain of his brother's old crew. Gramada spent the next 25 years as a soldier in Joseph Armone's crew. After Gambino's death in 1976, his brother-in-law Paul Castellano became family boss. Castellano soon became enmeshed in a rivalry with Captain John Gotti. Gotti had a poor relationship with Stephen, as he considered him to be a dangerous rival. When Gotti organized Paul Castellano's assassination and became the new Gambino boss, his shot of becoming promoted was in doubt. However, John was convicted of murder within the RICO Act and sentenced to life in prison. With Gotti in prison, Gramada finally became a captain in 1994, taking over Jack Giordano's crew. He was named to a ruling committee panel to assist acting boss John Jr. Gotti in running the family. Stephen sat in and contributed as acting boss on the Gambino ruling panel from 1996 to 2002, when it was disbanded after John Gotti's death. He then went back serving as captain.
If you haven't already, please take a second to subscribe to the channel, and also don't forget to click on the notification bell so you'll be up to date on all videos released from the Everything Network.